of scuba diving is an exciting, beautiful and magical place. The sport has some inherent dangers, and it is important to stay on top of one's game, both with skills and information. To keep your skills honed is up to you, but the information on which you base your enjoyable and safe diving, for that you need an association dedicated to the advancement of the safety of diving. Divers Alert Network, or DAN, was started by divers for divers. The main aim of the association is to assist injured divers no matter where you dive or travel. DAN strives to provide divers and doctors with the most up-to-date diving health and safety information. As part of this, they have dive research activities, which the members are welcome to participate in. For a diver and DAN member, the knowledge that you are part of an association that strives to supply information to ensure that divers are safe is already a comfort. With DAN, you can rest assured that if things do go wrong, there are people that will make sure that you get the best medical treatment in the shortest period of time, no matter where you are. To give you a better idea of DAN's diversity, we've asked 3 of our members to share their experiences with you.
I've always had problems with my ears. Even as a child, I needed grommets quite early, at an early stage, and I struggled with ear infections. That's why when I decided to do my diving course, I consulted a GP, and he had a look and said that he can't foresee any problems with me taking on a diving course. I did, however, start experiencing problems quite early on with the lessons in the shallow pool. I experienced a lot of pressure on my ears, and I really struggled to equalize. Going into the deeper waters, I struggled to go down, and the pressure on my ears increased. About 10 days later, I went for my sea dive, which I really battled with. Upon my descending, when I reached about 10 meters, I felt extreme aching in my right ear, and then a plopping sound, and it was as if it was a soft explosion, but the pain then completely disappeared. I then gently started to equalize and saw bubbles coming from my ear. It's then when I started experiencing severe dizziness, and it was as if I was spinning around in the water. Luckily we were close to the bottom, so I decided to lie down for a little while, and that kind of helped for the dizziness to fade away. And when it did, I decided to carry on with the diving, and I didn't experience any pain further. When I surfaced, my friends noticed a bit of bleeding coming from my right ear and into my mask. I also noticed that I was almost deaf in my right ear, and a couple of hours later I've also experienced a lot of aching. So that's when one of my friends suggested that I phone DAN, even though I wasn't a member, which I certainly am now. Within a couple of minutes, I managed to get hold of one of the DAN doctors. He knew exactly what was wrong with me, and he explained to me that I had actually burst an eardrum and that I would need medical dive attention. He also managed to set up an appointment with one of my local dive ENTs. I would like to thank DAN for giving me the right advice and the right referral, and being instrumental in getting me back into the water so quickly.
This is a classic situation of someone who had chronic ear problems growing up and then ultimately went diving, was assessed by someone but not someone that was familiar with diving medicine, and as a result, when she went diving, developed middle ear barotrauma and ultimately rupture of the tympanic membrane. It introduced cold water into the middle ear and caused the dizziness that she was talking about. Fortunately, this individual did not make an inadvertent rapid ascent to the surface. However, it does paint an important picture. Even though this had a happy ending, we want to advise people with ear, sinus, lung problems, problems with exercise tolerance, and any unconsciousness that they've either had or are at risk of having, that they see a physician trained in diving medicine, because those conditions may predispose you to significant risk.
We've been DAN members since DAN opened in South Africa, which is over 10 years now. We were on our annual overland holiday, when I had an accident and broke my jaw. We were in a very rural area and we were not sure how we were going to actually get me out because we thought I had perhaps injured my neck. We then remembered that we were DAN members and that DAN would help us if we were more than 50 kilometers away from home. We then called DAN, who sent an aeroplane to pick me up, take me into town to the nearest hospital, where we contacted our medical insurance, who thought the cost of the hospital was too expensive, and so DAN flew us back to South Africa and had an ambulance meet us at the airport and take us to the hospital. We think DAN saved us about 120,000 Rand in evacuation costs. When we did not know who to turn to, DAN came to our rescue.
DAN's group policy benefit is to assist injured divers primarily. Now, we've extended it as far as we can because we know that divers travel and they have needs when they travel, and we'd like to help them when they do, such as in this case. But we would never be able to provide all the benefits of a medical aid or comprehensive travel cover at the price we can. And there'd be too much redundancy because most people have other policies and they have other cover. So we're just there to provide you with what you need. Even so, it's nearly 600,000 Rands worth of cover, which in the case of a diving emergency is available everywhere in the world. And when you're outside your country of residence, we also cover certain medical conditions. But we have to limit it to some extent. So myocardial infarctions or heart attacks, stroke, intervertebral disc rupture and swimmer's ear can't be covered. Extreme sports can't be covered. And we recommend that DAN members consult their membership policy. You need to know what DAN can do for you, and we love to do it, but also realize that there's certain things that DAN can't do and be true to what it was primarily meant for.
I'm a scuba diving instructor trainer. I was working in the Seychelles on a private island called Dennis Island on the 17th of December 2006 at 9:30 in the morning. I did a 26-meter dive for 40 minutes, which was based on a computer time. On surfacing after the dive, I was handing back my gear to the skipper on the boat and lost consciousness on the surface. They pulled me onto the boat. Unfortunately, there was no oxygen on the boat itself. They traveled back with me back to the dive center. Once reaching the dive center, they alerted the people and managed to get the oxygen through to the dive center. Once I recovered, I found out that I was blind. With the administration of the oxygen, after approximately an hour, I started having blurred visions and so on, which eventually rectified itself. The management of the island itself notified the emergency services on the main island, which in turn they sent out a helicopter to come and evacuate me from the island. After approximately 35 minutes flight back to the main island, they took me by ambulance through to the main hospital, where I was admitted to ICU. My wife immediately contacted DAN on the emergency helpline, and from there DAN actually took it and actually just ran with it. They contacted the medical staff at the hospital because there was nobody trained at the hospital itself to actually deal with the situation. Due to the extent of the injuries, the best place to come to would be South Africa. Eventually on Monday evening, DAN managed to get me released from the island, and it took a 9-hour flight from the Seychelles with 2 flight stops, refueling stops, through to South Africa. We landed at Durban International and there was an ambulance waiting for me. I was transferred again from the aeroplane into the ambulance, back onto the oxygen, right up to the hospital, and from there into a recompression chamber where the doctors were on standby, which Dan had organized. It was 23 hours after the accident had occurred on the island. They got me into the recompression chamber and did a 5-hour session with me on the US tables. From there, they did another 5 sessions over a period of 5 days. At the end of this, I did start feeling a little bit of recovery. If it wasn't for Dan, I don't think I'd be sitting here to actually tell you about this story. After 6 months after returning to the island, I came back to South Africa and came and redid a medical. The doctor that I did the medical with gave me the green light to actually go ahead and dive. I contacted Dan at the time and asked them what is their opinion on this. Dr. Frans Cronje turned around and said, no, I must rather come in and see him first before actually attempting another dive. After doing several tests with him, it is discovered that the bullae in the lungs were actually damaged, and if I had gone and done a dive, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now to tell you the story either. So at the end of the day, trusting Dan, that's what it's basically about. To this day, I'm still one of Dan's most thankful and grateful members.
Diving in remote locations always presents unique challenges. One finds that the local facilities may be inadequate and evacuation may be awkward. And for that reason, we always advise divers when they go to remote locations to check in advance what facilities are available and what may be required in the case of a medical or diving emergency. One always expects first aid and oxygen to be available, but that's not always the case. And even in this case, oxygen was not available on the boat and nearly cost the individual's life. When you get to the local hospital, you may find that the facilities are inadequate and they may be understaffed. Frequently, if there isn't a recompression facility, you find that they don't have resident diving medical expertise either. What often happens is the poor doctors trying to do their best end up spending time trying to find solutions and delay the evacuation of the individual. Fortunately, in this case, the member's wife decided prudently to call Dan, and from the beginning we had the chance to intervene, to collaborate with the treating physicians and to arrange evacuation as promptly as possible. Even so, it took us 2 days to get the diver to a recompression facility. And on the topic of recompression and evacuation, these are costly episodes. The evacuation in this case was about 350,000 rand. Recompression in the order of about 20,000 rand. And if this person had not been a Dan member, it would have presented problems. Lastly, I'd like to say that it's so important after an incident or any injury to reassess your diving medical fitness before returning to diving. In this case, the diver's decision to do that saved his life. Whether it's a concussion, maybe a trivial chest injury, these things may result in significant loss of diving medical fitness and possibly a diving accident. Dan is one of the major organizations in the world that conducts significant medical research on recreational scuba diving safety. Supported by donations, grants and membership dues, Dan's studies are revealing important information that benefit the entire diving community and improve recreational diving safety worldwide. No other organization in the world shares this mission. Without Dan, many important questions about recreational diving safety would not only remain unchallenged, but unanswered. Project Dive Exploration, PDE, and Dive Safety Laboratory are the most extensive studies of recreational diving ever conducted. Dan's goal is to record more than 1 million dive profiles, to produce statistically accurate analyses of dive profiles, diver characteristics, and diver behavior. To date, more than 150,000 dive profiles have been collected. You can participate in PDE by donating your dives to Dan. Just complete the forms available on the website and email us your electronic dive profile from your dive computer. As part of its mission, Dan offers training on diving first aid and diving medicine. Several courses are available through Dan. These courses also include training for instructors and instructor trainers. Oxygen First Aid for Scuba Diving Injuries provides entry-level training in the recognition and management of possible diving-related injuries using emergency oxygen first aid. First Aid for Hazardous Marine Life Injuries. This course teaches divers to minimize these injuries and reduce diver discomfort and pain. Automated external defibrillators for scuba diving. More than 10% of all dive fatalities are actually caused by cardiovascular disease. This course teaches divers to provide care for sudden cardiac arrest, including the use of an automated external defibrillator. On-site neurological assessment for divers. Learn how to conduct a neurological assessment on a potentially injured diver on this course. Your training may help convince a diver of the need for oxygen first aid and help a diving physician to determine the proper treatment. Ask your instructor about DAN. He or she will tell you why every diver needs to become a member and can provide you with a DAN membership application. If you like, you can call Dan on 0860 242 242 and sign up right over the phone, or via our website www.dansa.org, or simply call us for information about our unique Diving Safety Association.